these rats were playing in the woods. Wanted some matches and that's no good. Yeah. Listen to smoke before you give it a try.
Only you.
Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about freaked out life. Nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Yeah.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Hi, I'm Gary Jacobs, and welcome to another edition of Long Island Backstory. My guest here today is Susan Gomberg, who is the director of the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation Long Island chapter, where she's worked for over 13 years. Susan's also a patient with Crohn's disease, and from what I understand, has a young son who also has Crohn's disease.
Does.
So I guess you're the right person to go to for this. So let's go to the beginning and tell me, what is Crohn's disease and what is colitis? Do they go together? What are the two and what's the difference?
So Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis are two related autoimmune or immune-mediated diseases of the intestinal tract. Crohn's disease can occur anywhere from the mouth to the anus, and colitis is limited to the colon. Can occur, usually occurs completely throughout the whole length of the colon.
So it's the same thing, it's just the location of it that determines?
Basically, there's a somewhat difference in terms of the depth to which it affects the wall of the intestinal tract, but
okay.
So Crohn's disease usually can be deeper, and it's kind of characterized by patches of inflammation, whereas colitis is usually relatively continual inflammation.
So when you say it could be from the mouth to the anus, I mean, somebody could have Crohn's disease, would they say of the esophagus?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. You can have it of the esophagus, you can have it of the liver, you can have it really anywhere in your digestive system, and lots of extraintestinal manifestations as well, which occur as like potentially mouth sores or inflammation of the eyes, inflammation of the skin. So those are other manifestations of inflammatory bowel disease.
Okay, so that inflammatory bowel disease, that encompasses both the two
Crohn's
diseases.
disease and ulcerative colitis.
And how many people are affected by these diseases?
Well, in the United States, approximately 1.6 million, and on Long Island, we estimate about 40,000 patients.
Wow.
So on Long Island, it's a little more than 1 in 100, which is really quite extraordinary. Around the country, it's considered to be approximately 1 in 200.
Right. Now, I'd imagine, because there's such a broad range, it could be from the mouth to the anus, and it could be just internal in your intestines. What are the symptoms? I mean, it sounds like almost anything. You're saying you sores, you have eyes. How would somebody know if they have this?
Well, there are a number of symptoms that most commonly occur. First of all, gut pain.
But a lot of gut pain when you get
right. A lot of people have a stomach ache. It goes away. It never comes back.
Chronic or acute? Are we talking gut pain?
Both. Both. It can be acute, it can be chronic. It's often characterized by either diarrhea or constipation. You could have joint pain. It sometimes mimics arthritis, sometimes it mimics lupus.
What about an ulcer? Somebody always has a bad stomach, they might think they have an ulcer?
Absolutely, sometimes people have both.
Okay.
And the other thing that sometimes happens is that people will have both inflammatory bowel disease, which is a disease and it's characterized by all these chemical and cellular changes, and irritable bowel syndrome, which is a a condition suffered by millions and millions and millions of Americans, but it's not a disease, it's a disorder. It's almost like a mechanical disorder, and many of our patients also have both.
Okay. So if one could be treated, or I mean, I've been reading things about some people say they've had it, that they're treated. Could it ever be treated, or is it only treated by being removed? Okay,
so Crohn's disease is treated medically and sometimes surgically, but it's not curable yet.
When you say treated medically, are you trying to treat the symptoms because you can't cure it?
Well, okay, so this is very complex.
Well, we have a half hour.
Right, right. So we have basically 4 levels of medication, and in the last 5 years, the medical world has turned itself topsy-turvy in terms of the approach. When I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease when I was 7 years old, so that's 53 years ago. And when I was diagnosed, and up until about maybe 10 years ago, the medical community basically felt you treat the disease with the least powerful medications. Okay. So you start with what are called ASA medications. Some brand names are like Asacol, Colazole. If there's an SOL in the name, it's usually an ASA medication, and it's actually an aspirin complex.
Which is trying to do what is doing what?
It's like aspirin is an anti-inflammatory. You hurt yourself, you take an aspirin. It's the same deal. It's kind of like a salve on an inflamed part of your body. Then there's steroids, which are very, very effective for very short-term reduction of inflammation. And years ago, again, people were kept on steroids for many, many years. They would have a flare, they would go on a steroid like prednisone. They would go into remission, they would flare again, and it was like a very vicious cycle. And of course, as we all know today, there are tremendous side effects and negative impacts. Not only that, but osteoporosis and it's a terrible drug. Then I guess in about the late 1980s, maybe early 1990s, they started to use immunosuppressing drugs. So the nature of these diseases is that you have it's first of all the genetic diseases. So you have a genetic predisposition and you have an environmental trigger. So the environmental trigger could be you have a cold, you have any kind of an infection, you travel to a foreign country and eat something that doesn't agree with your stomach, anything that engages your immune system in a normal way to fight something that it thinks doesn't belong. And what happens in Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis is that the immune system doesn't shut itself off. So it continues to exacerbate, and it starts to attack healthy cells, and that's how you get these ulcerations. So actually, some groundbreaking research was done right here on Long Island at North Shore University Hospital by a pediatric gastroenterologist, James Markowitz. That research was partially funded by CCFA, and they started to use immunosuppressing drugs like 6-MP, 6-mercaptopurine, azathioprine, Imuran. And those drugs lowered your immune system, but of course, again, there were potential side effects of being in a lowered immune state. And I don't know exactly when, but the 4th category of drugs is the newest one, and it's called biologics. And it was, I don't know, probably developed about 20 years ago, again, with some original funding from the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. But the first drug that was approved is called Remicade, and probably you may have seen commercials on TV for it. There's lots and lots of commercials for Remicade, Humira. You'll see a commercial that says, "Do you have Crohn's disease?" And it's actually sponsored by these drug companies. Right. But these
saying they are good, though.
But these are incredibly, incredibly effective medications in the I guess how you would characterize them is that they intercept inflammation before it occurs. Okay. So they are protein compounds, and they are given either by infusion or by injection.
One time or over and over again?
These are chronic diseases, so these are lifetime medications until hopefully we one day have a cure. So my son is on Remicade, and he's been on it for 11 years, and he goes every 8 weeks into a doctor's office or a hospital and has an infusion that takes a few hours. And the way that it works is, as the kind of cells are going through the bloodstream and the white blood cells are, engaged in the inflammatory process, these proteins literally bond to those white blood cells and prevent them from being engaged in the inflammatory process. And so over the course of time, if you stay on these medications, there's a reduction in inflammation, and then there's kind of a prevention of inflammation.
So you're a son who's been on it for a long time now. Does he not get these inflammations or these act ups, and he goes along life like he has no problems?
Generally, he doesn't. Generally, he doesn't get inflammation. Every other infusion, his blood is tested, and sometimes they need to adjust the amount of medication or the frequency of the medication. And some people fail. Some people actually, the medications stop working or they work less well. You have to switch. Sometimes you can change from one medication to another and get a little better efficacy. But in general, they're very effective, and they really maintain remission for a long time.
Right. Something when I was reading up on it, I found interesting is they said in third world countries, the rate of, I don't know if it's not diagnosed, but you don't see this as much in third world countries, which is interesting if there's a genetic component or a family. I think I read that they don't want to say genetic, but they say a family history of it. Why is it that in third world countries they don't have this?
Well, that's a super interesting question. Good question.
Well, I found it interesting because I said, well, why don't we just find out what they're doing, do it here, and we won't have the problem anymore.
One of the things that they are not really purposefully doing, but one of the things that happens in pre-industrialized countries is that they live in a way that their natural gut has a lot of bacteria in it. And that bacteria is extremely healthy, and we need good, healthy bacteria. And living in an industrialized country, we live in such a sanitized way that we have really altered our microbiome, that we've altered the population of our gut to the degree that it doesn't have these healthy bacteria in it. And if you have that genetic predisposition, again, if you don't have the genetic predisposition, and by the way, I don't know why they said it's not a genetic disease, but there have been over 160 genes associated with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis that have been actually identified. So it is very much a genetic disorder.
So we can test for it if you have a predisposition?
Well, it's a good question. There really aren't any tests for it. There really aren't any tests for it. I think that if you were to be concerned about having a child that would have Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, there might be, at this point, some very expensive and very advanced testing that might indicate whether or not those genes would be present. But I don't think there's any real in vitro testing for it yet. And I don't know anyone who's had actual genetic testing for it.
Right. Now, your son was diagnosed at a young age. I have two questions. First of all, how do you diagnose? And second of all, does it always come out at a young age? Is it always diagnosed when you're that young?
No. Well, I was 7 when I got.
And your son was.
And my son was 12.
Okay.
My son was 12, and it's diagnosed predominantly through colonoscopy. So, I mean, today there's something called a capsule endoscopy where you can actually swallow. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. This is like super cool science fiction stuff. It looks like a jelly bean, and you swallow it, and they strap like a receiver to your body, and 8 hours later, eventually it comes out the other end, and then they have 10,000 pictures of the inside of your gut, and those pictures are extremely detailed. So that's one way of diagnosing it.
So it's visual. It's not a blood test. They could say she has this.
It's many things. That's one of the ways in which they can actually see the inflammation. if they do a colonoscopy, they can take biopsies, and under the microscope, the pathologist can identify exactly not only...
Are they seeing a bacteria, a virus? What are they seeing?
They're seeing the cellular changes of the, I guess, I'm not a doctor, so this is where I'm getting a little bit,
We're out of your territory a little bit?
Perhaps
Okay.
a little bit too scientific, but I think that what it is they actually can see visually under a microscope the cellular changes that are indications of inflammation. And then there are also blood markers, just like if you went to the doctor and you had a simple CBC where they prick your finger and they could say, oh, I can see you either have a virus or you have a bacterial infection. There are much more sophisticated blood tests that cost thousands of dollars that most of our patients do have as part of not only the process of diagnosing, but the process of identifying which medications might work best for what you have. Because one of the, again, there's so much going on in this field in terms of research. It's a very exciting time if you happen to be working in this field. So we're entering a phase called the Individuation of Medicine. So this disease was first identified by Crohn, who's a doctor, with two partners in the 1930s. And up until probably the last 2 or 3 years, it was Crohn's disease and there was ulcerative colitis. And now the scientists are moving towards a nomenclature that's going to look more like or sound more like IBD1, IBD2, IBD3, IBD4, up to an infinite number, right? And they'll be able to really look at your pathology and say, based on what we see under the microscope and in your blood work, this is the medication that you should be on. And so whereas Crohn's disease can have so many manifestations, and it can be mild, it can be severe. There are people who have one attack, never have another attack, and there are people who take every medication known to mankind and never get well.
So people watching the show, because we're starting to run short on time, people watching the show, could somebody be 30 years old and have a stomach ache and be concerned that they could have?
IBS? So there are two basic bulges in when people are diagnosed, and the first one is usually late teenage years through about age 30, and it's unfortunate in that these diseases hit very hard at a time when young people are just really embarking on their lives. And they make going to college very difficult, they make getting married, all sorts of things that should be exciting in normal parts of life challenging. And then the other time, which almost is more heartbreaking, believe it or not, is in the elderly. So there's another bulge after age 50, and I get calls in the office from people who are 80 years old, and they say, I've led a completely normal life, and I can't get out of the bathroom. And it's horrible. And it's so devastating to people when they get diagnosed at an older age, because there's really no time to adjust.
Right. Let me ask you, because in the remaining minutes, what does your organization offer? Because people watching this, you said there's about 40,000 people on Long Island. I would imagine anybody who's doing this should use your group as a resource. What are some of the things, really quickly, that you guys offer there? Okay,
so we have support groups throughout the island. We have support groups for women, support groups for men, support groups for parents, support groups for patients, support groups for teenage girls and teenage boys. We offer education programming throughout the year. Again, in different locations. About every 18 months, we do a very large education program that covers a broad spectrum of concerns and age groups. And then we do very specific programs. This coming fall, in October in Merrick, we will be offering a pediatric program. We're going to be offering a program for nurses and fellows, gastro fellows. So we offer education. CCFA maintains a website, www.ccfa.org, where patients can go for information. We will talk to a patient. We will connect them with resources that they may not be able to get locally, and we answer everyone's questions.
Great. Susan Gomberg, thank you very much for coming. And we probably could have spoke for another hour, but the important thing is that if somebody finds the show because they're flicking through the channels or they happen to see it on the internet, that they reach out to your organization, and that just opens up the wealth. And most importantly, I guess, is that you guys are working towards a treatment of this disease.
And a cure.
So our children, a treatment and a cure, that they don't have to deal with it. I'm Gary Jacobs, and thank you for joining us here at Long Island Backstory.
It's springtime in the forest of the black-tailed deer. The young male is feeling playful. It's time for tag. The female flicks her ears. Her way of saying, "Catch me if you can."
Never know it on the battlefield. But nearly half of today's military are National Guard and reservists. However, they can't answer our nation's call without their employer's support. If you're an employer, visit esgr.org and find out how to do your part. After all, their response depends on yours.
All over America, people are taking the national radon test. Have you?
You put me on the spot.
Have you heard of radon?
I never thought about it. I don't know.
I think it's a secret killer or a silent killer.
Poison gas that seeps into the house.
It's one of the tests we did with the inspector before buying the home.
Why worry about it?
Why worry? Take the national radon test. True or false? Radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer.
True. I'd say false.
No, it's true.
I thought of cigarettes and then pollution.
That's something new to me.
Radon can penetrate a concrete block.
It's false.
False? False?
It's true.
I wouldn't know how they could protect you from that.
It's scary.
The Office of the Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested for radon.
False?
It's true.
True?
I should know about it because I worked in the hospital for many years.
So it's bad. We should get our house tested.
Sure, I'm gonna call it.
1-800-SOS-RADON. How can you not call?
1-800-SOS-RADON.
R-A-D-O-N.
I propose 3 cheers for those we leave behind.
Congratulations.
It's in paper now.
Good job. Congratulations. Proud of you. All right. Ensign Elliott. Who's going to salute him? Guys, who gets to salute him first?
Here's the 2-1.
Hi, I'm Barry Bonds for RAD, Recording Artists, Actors, and Athletes Against Drunk Driving. In my league, we hit home runs without a designated hitter. But if you want to get home safe, there should always be a designated driver. So when you're with someone who is drinking, take their keys. Call a cab or drive them home yourself. Because friends don't let friends drive drunk.
Your generous support has made it possible for United Way to help build strong communities across America for over 100 years. Thank you. Now more than ever, it's crucial that we maintain the strength and vitality of our neighborhoods, towns, and cities. United Way is active in local communities 365 days a year, making a measurable difference in the lives of Americans. Helping local communities identify pressing issues and opportunities and committing the resources necessary to address them. United Way helps to strengthen America one community at a time. Your local United Way has relied on your generous support for years. Your community is counting on you. Please continue to support your local United Way. Strong communities mean a stronger America.
Think being a big brother means you always have to be a perfect role model?
Nice.
Think again. To learn more about becoming a big brother or big sister, call 1-888-412-BIGS.
Look, there's a moose. Where? Over there. Oh, yeah. Look, over there. I see a fish. A fish with 2 stripes.
Spend time with kids anytime, and it helps prevent crime. It's that easy.
When I have an asthma attack, I feel scared. Sometimes my parents have to take me to the hospital. I feel like a fish with no water.
You know how to react to their asthma attacks. Here's how to prevent them. Call 1-866-NO-ATTACKS. Visit www.noattacks.org or call your doctor. Because even one attack is one too many.